This meeting is being recorded. We got that finished, the recording message. I'll start again, eh? Hi, my name's Richard Puller, and you probably all recognise me. You've seen me at quite a few of the sessions how do we get rid of that silly thing? Yep, we're right. Is the screen looking good for you guys? It's just a bit dodgy for me. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Okay. My name's Richard Puller. I am infrastructure delivery manager at Watercare Waikato, and my job has been to sort of undertake the planning. This project was led, as most of you know, by Stephen Howard till recently, but Stephen's replacement, Isaac McIntyre, he's our new senior strategy and consent planner, and he will, as we go through, he'll start picking up these presentations which Steve used to present. As you can see on the first slide there, that's a nice view of our treatment plant, looking down from the top pond, where it goes in at the screens up the top here, down through the ponds and out through the next set of ponds, and then finally it goes through our little day pond here and out to the sea, where we UV it prior to leaving. Today, the first item I'm going to talk about, because it's been the first one we've had for a couple of months. Most of you have been following these meetings, so probably some bits I won't dwell on, but feel free to butt in and ask questions as I go. The first one I'm going to talk about is the plant upgrade. And before I start it, I'll sort of show you it's going to be located in that area there. You can all see it, correct? What I'm doing, you can see my mouse there, so I'm just checking. And that's where we're going to be doing it. So that is sort of the plan view of it. It's an MBR plant capable of a peak capacity hydraulically of about 3,200 cubic meters. The contract was awarded last week for this plant to Apex Water, who are the same company that delivered our plant at Mary. But this is obviously a fair bit bigger, and it's an 18-month delivery. It's a design build contract, so it's been awarded, but they'll now go away and develop their concept design, and there'll be a design interchange go on with this project as we go through it. So in the future sessions, early next year, once that process and we've got a more definite finalised layout of this MBR plant, we can I'll bring the project manager for that along, and he Peter Crabb, and he can help explain it in more detail, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of interest. All right, so any questions on the plant upgrade? No, good. Okay, now I'm going to start talking about subsurface drip irrigation. This is one which we've sort of dwelt on quite a bit over the last 12 months. This is just a photo there for some of you. I think I've shown it in previous things. That's how these polyethylene pipes, which have special sort of dripper connections in them, are sort of installed, just to give you, has that little mole plough. They roll off the tubes as you sort of do your little slit trench there. These are sort of just an overview of what we're up to and where the locations we've been looking at. Up here in Mangatafu Road, we've done a lot of survey and soil analysis in this. It's quite deep. It's up on the plateaus which occur around Raglan. It's got quite deep loamy soil, and we've sort of gone through the details, but those were sort of the 25 hectares we were looking at, although some of this, if we did go ahead with the scheme, would be reserve fields for using for future growth. As you can see, it's a long 7 or 8 kilometre pipe, and it's a elevation of about 140 metres up there. So we've looked at this, and we've we're getting the sort of costs reviewed, but our initial costs were very high, and so early in the next year we should have that sort of confirmed. We had been working on a memorandum of understanding on this one. As you can sort of see, we've taken the design here on this one. Sort of, these are all the sub-mains which feed down, and the soil dissipates, and we cycle around these on a 12-day cycle. 25, I think I've gone through all those bullet points. We'd done a concept design of the conveyance pipe and the pump station. The MOU sort of was something which has taken a while, and we were holding off sort of doing further investigations until we got that, but we were successful in getting that with the landowner last month. I've sort of signalled last or 2 months ago, sorry now, that we were looking a little bit back at a concept. We'd looked at sort of to some extent back in 2020, but we'd sort of stalled it in favour of looking at the better soils which occur up in Mangatawhiri Road. Now these are sort of sites which Stephen Howard sort of looked at. He looked at the areas of common usage for sound splash and things, and sort of worked with parks at that time. But I would stress we have not gone back to WDC Parks to talk about this. We're sort of developing this just off-site at the moment. The soils here aren't very good. They're weathered. So we've sort of run models of it and had the same people look at it again. And there is a possibility of doing something here and doing subsurface drippers. But the trouble was we'd have to do it slightly differently to how we did it up there. And I'll just flip to the next slide briefly. And the one up there, we just end up with equally spaced irrigated tubes, about 300 down, and I think the spacing is about 600. In this one, we'd probably vary the spacing, but we'd have to put sand slit drains and do some sort of soil remediation just to improve the drainage on this. So yeah, it's sort of it's worth looking at this, and we've part of their modelling. Obviously, they look at rainfall and evapotranspiration, the water coming out and lost through up to the atmosphere. And it's a quite a complex model, and we can, if we do progress with a subsurface strip, we can get the people along to one of these meetings and sort of they can talk about it better with you and show some better graphics of how they show the soil dissipating through, and they don't just model the moisture dissipating through the soil. They model the nutrient uptake and things like that, because this sort of disposal does offer some nutrient reduction. So that was sort of what we've been focusing on. But the trouble is with this one, because it's so surface poor drainage, you have to collect the water at the bottom, and see these dotted lines are sort of collection things, and then you've got a problem of what do we do with that sort of effluent at the bottom? Do we discharge it into a sort of planted area again and hope it dissipates, or do we relook at a stream recharge option, or a different native planted option? And those are sort of the other things we're sort of looking at it, and we sort of obviously would like input into people's ideas on that one, because there are a number of locations we could probably develop some sort of hybrid sort of scheme between this SDI and a stream recharge maybe. So that's what we'll probably be looking at in the early next year, those sort of options. I think I've gone through that. That was just a bit of a layout and just stressing, this option developer, what we might be able to do in Wainui Reserve or around the Wainui stream, or potentially up through this gully here, which has already been planted by the community, is what we're sort of looking at for some innovative thinking on that one. So
would Wainui Reserve take all of the water, or is it a a part option in terms of disposal?
Would take all of it, yeah. But it would mean that we'd have to look at how the final design comes out and how we could utilise the ponds up there for storage for wet weather, and how we can balance flows. There's a whole lot of things you have to look at as to sort of understand what sort of maximum flows they do look at. In the work that Peter Crabb's done in developing, they develop a design which they sort of give to a first cut concept design. We had that done by our consultants, and that's what the tender is based their design on. A specimen design is what we call it, and they come back and play around with them, and they're all different, the proposals and how they're going to utilize the ponds and things like that. So a lot of how we deliver flows here and how regularly we'd probably still need our marine outfall are things we're going to have to work through with them through their design phase of the design build contract. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, Keith.
No, it was a good answer. Yeah, I'm sort of leading you, sorry, a little bit. And the other leading question I have for you is in relation to pricing. You did mention before we've got some indicative prices just for this group in terms of us getting to a shortlisted option. When do you think we'd be in a position to be able to provide the option as well as price estimate?
I think by the end of January we will have it, because we're quite advanced in the design on the Mangatawhiri one, because that's the one we've sort of, people are aware that's what we've been focused on. Not quite, we can give probably a similar estimate for this one if it went to a purely SDI one, but if we're going for some sort of hybrid, Keith, we're still, we'll probably come up with some concepts and sort of share them in the meetings like this with people, and there might even have to be some workshops around that, and that will take various forms. Like me and Matt Sunday 2 weeks ago, we sort of gave a very similar presentation down at the Marae, and it was quite well received. And I'm pretty sure when we started talking about, and we only talked it briefly about the potential of a hybrid option, that they were very interested in being involved as well.
Yeah.
Richard, is there sort of public access issues if you looked at putting in subsurface lines at the reserve there? Would you have to?
Yeah, exactly. And
from
those sort of things we'd have to work through. We have talked way back in 2022 parks and tried to get these in areas which aren't of usage. They don't get high usage, and you can sort of see on the screen in front of me, Steve at that time, that there's issues around horse riders on beach. So he was thinking as part of the project we might bring up a road up, access way here with a car park, and try and extend some of the. Plus, we could modify some of the routes around them. But these are very, very early ideas, and I really want to stress that we haven't talked to our parks department at all since 2020, and they would have ideas and questions exactly around like you did about, is this really compatible?
Can I just say that in the community there's a strong feeling to move away from the unnecessary animal farming on the reserve. So other activities like cut and carry crops and subsurface drip irrigation, like no one understands why we have 50 cows or whatever on our books. Like, there's a really strong sense in the community that the winery reserve needs to be used for other things than small scale farming.
Yeah, and I would add that the nitrogen that this UMBR is going to produce is when the Freeman Cook, who's our soil specialist, looked at it, he said, "Whoa, it's so low in nitrogen and phosphorus, you might have to fertilize this just to get the grass to grow." So you get what I mean? But then we can, in our membrane plants, we can go down certain lowness in nitrogen levels, but we can always bring them back up again too by less flocculation before the membranes and things like that.
But I mean, the reserve option would be a lot cheaper, wouldn't it, in terms of
Exactly.
and pumps and things like that.
Yes.
As opposed to the further up the hills there, you're talking 5-6 kilometres or so.
Yeah, but it is difficult soils, and so I really think, let's develop some concepts and then come back and socialise them with you.
A couple of questions about the reserve option. It doesn't really also seem very future-proofed, like for the growth, whereas
exactly
the other one looks a bit more future-proof.
Yeah,
Will it break down in the Mangatawhiri option? Break down obviously the cost of setting up and installing the plant, and then what the landowner gets, or is the landowner going to do a deal where we give them some access to develop other land?
All those things need to be thought through, and that's a really good point, because it's quite complex. Would we buy it? Would we lease it? Those areas we would want them that I showed you up in Mangatawhiri Road. We wouldn't want stock on them.
No.
So how do you manage a farm around that, and what do you do with the rest of the land if we're owning it? So so the whole land thing comes with a whole lot of complications. It's not as easy as just the engineering side.
Have you talked to some of the long-term planning and the other parts of the council around transport and other things? Because I know that this came up in another meeting I was in, and I was like, you need to talk to the water care people, because there's definitely like future development ambitions of certain landowners, and this could be married together.
Hazel, who is now the team leader of the growth team at WDC, has been working, and they've developed a growth strategy around roading and water and wastewater. And I'm sure if you get in touch with her, Chris, she'll happily share that with you. It's only just been completed, I think. But it's quite good work, and it does look at all those areas that have been zoned and are future zoned, especially in West Raglan.
Yeah, and there's definitely a resilience and access issue about the bridge, and there's obviously been conversations about a potential access via Mangatawhiri. Say the bridge got knocked out by an incident, and then that could be married together with the wastewater, and then the developer could maybe, sort the land out on a very cheap basis in return for being able to develop other areas.
Chris, you're right, Chris, but there is, as Richard's mentioned, Hazel and the team are doing all exactly what you've just said. So there is some really good synergy and alignment on that future growth, like real future growth, and other transport links, etc. So there's a lot of work.
Sorry, Richard, I was just going to say, I spent probably the last year with the Rotorua Lakes District Council, their wastewater. I'm sort of an electrical project manager, and I've worked at Hamilton City Council for their upgrades for the last couple of years. Then I went on to Rotorua, and they've got a very similar problem that you're looking at here. Their solution ultimately was to use the pine tree scenario, where they were spraying their output from their plants into the pine tree reservations. However, it's got to the stage now where the nitrogen levels in those pine trees have reached absolute saturation. So I'm sort of seeing something similar here that you're going to run into with going up top there and using the ground.
Yeah.
It eventually will over-saturate with nitrogen. Having another option down the bottom there is a great option, I think.
Okay.
Possibly looking at a waste, like a wetland scenario.
Yeah.
Create wetlands down there and trying to use more of nature to break that output down faster could be a lot more beneficial.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, the Rotorua example has been a lesson to everybody. I mean, I think their pumice soil, and Keith would probably know a bit about it too, has really contributed to that. And I think the spray irrigation in the forests has sort of fallen from vogue, you know.
Embrace a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
the end result of that is from the decades of spraying into those pine trees have resulted in the pine trees growing up with very shallow root systems because, of course, all the water's on the surface.
Mm.
So what you then get is high winds come through and, you know, you're getting trees blown over left, right and centre because they're very shallow rooting because all the
Did they
water's...
have an MBR? I don't
Yeah,
think.
they have
No,
NBR.
no,
Yeah,
the
they put-
lower nitrogen removal too. You're right there, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have their MBR plant in. They also have they've got a bioreactor in as well, but that's capable of about 50,000 people, and it forced them into putting the MBR in to sort of add to the increase in population. But even that's stretched to its maximum now, and they're facing major problems.
Are they not doing an upwelling rock filter through to the lake? That's their final solution, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they're trying to find solutions. I mean, I would be looking at a geothermal solution, to be honest. I mean, you've got a consistent heat source there that you could look at evaporation and, you know, possible cooling towers or something like that, where you could evaporate in large quantities, which is, you know, is always the issue is how do we get rid of this water? Because, you know, we've got so much of it coming through the wastewater system. We're trying to find solutions of putting it into the ground. We're trying to find solutions of, you know, putting it into trees. How do we get it eventually back into the ecosystem where it's, you know, cleaned up by the ecosystem, but not at a cost where it's, you know, contaminating the ground? Because the other thing we've got is, of course, we've got a high amount of antibiotics that are coming through the water system that the plants now have to deal with, the microbes of trying to break down antibiotics. I mean, yeah, it's a big problem.
But that's why I want to grow hemp, but apparently they're not ready for that yet.
Yeah, but I'm all for. I mean, I've just got back to Raglan. I'm getting into this, so yeah, I'm all for helping you guys out and any suggestions I can. Like I said, I've been electrical project manager doing wastewater for the last 4 to 5 years now. So yeah, it's if I can help, absolutely.
I mean,
Thank you.
the other option is a cut and carry type system where Taupo, some of their plants have a sort of a cut and carry operation where they grow lucerne and they harvest it, or they grow ryegrasses and they harvest it.
That was our plan. Yeah, was to do that.
The cost of that, and depending, you know, on the topography of the land too. You know, you can't easily grow and harvest a crop if you've got rolling land. But it seems to work very well down in Taupo for their 2 or 3 of their plants. The Taupo Municipal's got 2 farms now that they operate, and then Whareroa, I think they grow lucerne and harvest that. Obviously, there's a cost to that, and this fodder can't be used on dairy farm land at the moment, because I think Fonterra are quite careful about what they allow their suppliers to feed their cows. But yeah, over.
Have you looked at the previous studies for the Wainui Reserve? Because when the existing consent was given, there were studies to look at whether Wainui Reserve might be an option. And I'm not clear as to how different your proposal is from what they were looking at then.
Yeah, to be honest, John, that's the sort of knowledge gap we've got with Steve leaving. I know he's got heaps and heaps, and he went through everything, and he's got some really old schemes there. So it's probably one of you know, Isaac's going to do a lot of reading and learning around this, because there's been so many studies just done in ours, but there's all these previous things. It would be a bit ironic if we go in a circle, though, wouldn't it?
Because they looked at it then and rejected it and said that the sand wasn't deep enough to cope with it, but it may be that you're looking at something quite different.
Yeah, I think what we're dealing with too is that the treatment processes now can strip out a lot of things. Okay, like Chris mentioned, I think, you know, merging pharmaceuticals and things like that are still an issue. Yeah, you know, and everybody's scratching their heads on that one, aren't they?
Yeah, we haven't got an answer for endocrine disruptors or pharmaceuticals. it's not really part of the treatment process. Some of it gets dealt with in terms of the some of the process, but majority of it is retained. It's not yet I guess a formal part of treatment or response, and nobody really has an answer to it yet.
Because a year or two ago, you did get a study done looking at possible uses for the infiltrated water, which sort of ranged, as Hugh was mentioning, through lucerne and such like, also included Christmas trees and all sorts of other things. So, there seemed to be a wide range of quite profitable options.
Yeah, I'm not sure, John, if you would classify them as profitable, or if you just classify them as activities that might be able to have an uptake of water for the purposes of evaporation or transpiration on the land. But they're certainly activities nonetheless. And I guess in Taupo's case, of course, they've done a cut and carry crop, not necessarily on the basis of it's an easy way to deal with the water, but it was to deal with their nitrogen budget to the lake. So for them, it's about removing nitrogen out of their catchment and putting it in somebody else's catchment.
Because the study that you got done was claiming that it could be quite a lot more profitable than sheep and beef. I think they ranked Christmas trees as the most profitable.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we were looking at is utilising these subsurface drippers, and part of, like Hugh was explaining, is the ability to do the cut and carry. That's what Steve had really focused in on, and what our people who were experienced in this were saying, because I think it had to do with the nitrogen uptake too. You know, that they did look at the different types of plants and the different types of uptakes, and I can't recall, but I thought what we were doing was one of the best, to be honest. Yeah.
Can I come back to your initial statement about the MBR? You were saying it would deal, I think, with 3,200 cubic meters a day.
That's its peak capacity.
Yeah, how long that fits with the planned growth of the town, and because we're supposed to be going from 3,000 to 12,000, and I think our current take consent is 3,000 cubic meters, so 3,200 is not a lot above that, especially if we've still got stormwater infiltration.
Yeah, okay, I'll go through all of those. And you had quite a list of things there, but we have looked at future population, and when peak comes on, we can go through that. The way we've set out this plant is so that we can install more membranes and things, so that it's easily upgradable in stages. Eventually, you do they're built in lines, and they're called trains, and eventually we can add more. So we'll look at what we can do beyond that, but we have looked at the future populations. That's all part of the sort of basis of design of when we start this. So yeah, that's all been done. I would like to add the membrane doesn't just do nutrient removal, it removes microplastics and viruses as well. So I think we've sort of gone through that in the previous one, so that's good. The question
just on the current consent, John, is so it's 2,600 cubic litres in any 24-hour period. But that, again, that's a maximum, which is well above what we're currently doing.
Yeah,
excluding storm events, etc.
And part of this consent process is part of a consent process, John, is to actually look forward and get those flows, and we've got a pretty good handle on them, and that'll be built into our application as that growth in the volume. And we have looked at it as we've gone through these field designs too. You know.
So is there some storage built into the current plans, so that if it gets more than 3,200 with storm infiltration, then it can be stored until it can be processed?
We will keep one of the plants, one of the oxidation ponds live, so excess will be put into it, and if we bring that and Peter's better to talk to you about this in another session, how we utilise that and how we blend the flows to leave. He'll have a better handle on that once the design processes. And plus, we look back over the rainfall we've had over the last few years, and we model how often roughly the capacity will be inundated. And I think it worked out in our basis of design about 5 or 6 times a year we go over that, John. So that's when we'll utilise the other methods of treatment and storage, because if we can store it and get it back into the plant within 24 hours, we can run it through the MBR. But if we keep it out longer than that, then it has to go through another process. You know, we just leave it in the oxidation ponds and let it do the same process as we're currently doing. Yeah.
It's a good question from John in terms of the growth, but one of the things, so in the picture, if we go in the PowerPoint, we had the trains of membrane there.
Yeah, do you want me to bring it up?
Yeah, if we look at growth in terms of one of the benefits of the MBR is we can add another train to be able to deal with the additional process. Is in the design element, have we got land easily accessible to add another train from a growth perspective? So looking at the site, where if we were to grow that site, where would we grow it?
These are quite probing questions, and we have talked about it. I'll go through the upgrade to start with. We have left more room. We can put membranes in the end here. How it works is, first of all, we bring the flows through the screens, and then we go into an area up the top end here where up the top end here, and it goes through sorry, I'm getting it around the wrong way. This way, and it goes through anoxic where it's starved of oxygen. Then we go through the aerated tanks, and then finally we go through the membrane. Part of what they've planned, they've got one of the options they've got is to for future growth is to repeat the train. It is a confined site, but we've got other ways where we can put an MABR, which is similar to what we do, and replace the anoxic zone here there, and we up the capacity, and we have a better thing. And Pete can go through with you guys what an MABR is. It's not, the MBR is right at the end, and that's just a glorified, very, very fine sieve, which takes everything out, you know, and all you get is the crystal clear permeate at the end. The MABR is basically a glorified, a very, very big growth media, which we feed here into rather than bubbling the ponds like we currently do. But I'm getting a bit sidetracked. We do have a problem, Keith, here with expansion, and probably we will have to look. We're already the panels are coming down as part of this job, so because we needed that just as a laydown area for construction, and we're going to probably have a think while we've got them down where we put them back up again, because it makes more sense to retain this area for future growth. Is that
your other option there, Richard, would be to look at putting them on pontoons and floating them?
Exactly, and that's, like you say, Woodcare's done that in Rosedale quite successfully.
Because now that the MBR is going to go in, which is great technology, but the only other issue I can see here is going to be the consistent power cuts that we get feeding the plant. I mean, that's our next problem. What happens when we lose power? How do we...
Part of the spec in these plants is to have a generator big enough, because we've got to keep our biological zone live by aerating it. So having at least the capacity to maintain that, so that sort of looks after that. When we do have generators for the network in big power cuts, which we can plug in and keep our key pump station going, along with some of them have storage as well. So we do sort of foresee power cuts in our network, and we will do something up here. It has been thought about,
That's good.
Those solar panels I can see on the left-hand side of that picture.
Yeah, that you're aware of that, were you, John? With the solar farm we put up, we built this about 2 years ago.
To power cut Is it possible to put a battery with those and actually?
At the moment, we don't have a battery with it. It's purely and we were limited by how much we could pump back into the grid by the transformer we currently have there. But obviously, there's going to be a power upgrade into the MBR plant. That'll be one of the things Pete's first jobs on his list. Yeah. But yeah, maybe a battery is a good idea. At the moment, we only had the budget, didn't we, Matt, for the panels?
Yeah, and it's at the moment the panels are essentially offsetting our power use across Raglan, so that's including the wastewater treatment plant and water treatment plant, but it's not stable enough to use to power an MBR plant is the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a generator is what's required for that, John. But essentially what it's about is about the sustainability of how we use energy, and unfortunately some of that is credits. So the ability to offset what we're doing by creating credits and feeding back into the network, just because a power system like that can't power the plant itself. It just isn't stable enough.
Yeah, but we do currently feed back into the grid, John.
Yeah,
that's how
it's essentially offsetting the power usage in Raglan.
Yeah, and it's not just our treatment plants; it's our pump stations too, which are users of power. So we currently, until we pack them up and put them in containers, we generate. We're pretty neutral, aren't we, Matt?
And it's cheaper to have a backup generator than it is to have a backup battery, is it?
Yeah, and if generators, the main priority is for the period of outages that we get is to keep the biological zone from dying.
Yeah, it's the stability, John, to be able to ensure the power supply for long enough, whereas batteries obviously have their limitations, whereas a generator is we just fill it up. But obviously these things are the things that Peter and the team will look at about what's next, because these things are evolving, as Chris probably knows from his experience, all the time. And how an MBR plant is a challenging plant because of its power demands. But there's always new technology that's been looked at that we're very keen to be involved in. But at the moment, the solar plant was there for a very specific purpose, to offset our energy use. It wasn't there the intent wasn't to power an MBR. So we'll just have to see how that pans out. And Peter's always looking at innovative ways of doing new things. So it's great. And I think once he comes and presents, I think you'll get an idea of what his plans are and where he's looking.
And he'll answer them far better, you know.
And John, there has to be resilience in the network. Like, so if we didn't have power for like 2 or 3 days because of a massive natural disaster, like we can't just think, oh, power cut's only 20, 30 minutes, you know?
But there may be a joint option, you know, to sustain us. But I think in the short term, it's about ensuring the plant, as Richard said, we keep the plant as stable as possible and operating as well as possible. So that'll always be the primary focus.
Because just up the hill, Extreme Zero Waste is going in for quite a big solar array as well. And I think they're using batteries. So I don't know whether it's possible to work with them and maybe have a joint installation.
The other way to look at it as well is to, in those scenarios that we just talked about, where the power's off for long periods of time, during the day, you can actually reuse that solar farm to assist the generator.
Yeah.
So it will actually ease the load on the generator, which in turn will extend the fuel of the generator to run longer. So there are clever ways of doing it if you look at it as a whole.
Yeah, and that's how I believe that I'll have to get the team to validate it, but I believe that's how it's operating at the moment, Chris. So it's essentially supporting the running of the plant and then offsetting elsewhere. So, and then, as you said, if we were operating on generator, it would be the same concept of how much can we generate through the power and through the solar, and then what do we offset it using generator?
Well, exactly. I mean, your ultimate goal then is, if you're going to use generator, if you can then create a biofuel from processes like this. I do know that they were looking at using human waste as biofuel to create diesel alternatives that can offset a generator. So I mean, you know, if you're able to reuse something of that cycle, it does open up innovation and possibilities for sure.
Yeah, we're certainly happy to look at it. I mean, in Mangere, we use a significant amount of the process to offset our energy use by digesters, etc., to generate power. So yeah, that's something we're always keen to look at. And we are looking to be energy neutral in Auckland. I'm not going to guess the date again. I think it was 2030, but sorry, I'd have to make sure I get that right before I validate it. But yeah,
And that was what I was going to say, Matthew. Probably the unfortunate part for Raglan is that at scale, we probably aren't large enough in terms of that creativity, in terms of using algal algae for bioplastics or biodiesel or anything like that. We just simply don't have the scale. And the other thing we do have is, unfortunately, we're limited by resource, and some of that resource is just pure capex. So sometimes the belts and braces approach is probably the approach we have to take, simply because that's where we'll end up at an affordability level.
oh, absolutely. As I said earlier, I think technology is improving all the time, and as it does, then we can look at it more closely. But I agree with you at the moment, Keith. I don't think it would be an option really right now, but you never know in the future.
Just while you're talking about money, how ready are we to go to Shane Jones and his new pot of money? Because apparently he's going to have a fair bit of that in the new provincial growth fund or whatever it's been rebranded as.
I don't know about it. I don't know whether you'd call it a fair bit. When you look at the size of New Zealand Inc.'s problem versus our requirement, we will, whenever there is government money on the table, put an application in for that funding source. Right now, government has simply said under its 100-day plan that it plans to revoke the 3 water reform legislation. So that's the 3 acts that have been passed. They haven't mentioned the Economic Act, so that looks like the Economic Regulator will still be coming into play, but the other 3 acts will be repealed. That's looking to be early in the new year. DIA are telling us that will be February. So I guess around February is when Shane Jones and the balance of the coalition government will inform councils about how they would like to see us constructed, either by the way of CCOs or off-sheet balance accounting, whatever that means, because generally, and we have to carry the debt, then it sits on our balance sheet, and they've done away with entities. So there's still a little bit of information required before we really know what's happening in that space. You're right, some money's been signalled, but we haven't been given any information in terms of how to go about applying for it, what the quantum is, and what the fishhooks are that go with that funding.
But you're absolutely right, Chris. But I can assure you, council has since pre-election actually been putting all of their ducks in line and ready to go and lobby ministers. And as we find out which ministers have got extra bags of money, we're definitely lining up that. And in fact, we're in council today, and that conversation, we had that exact conversation on how to do that, knowing that every other council in the country is in the same situation, and they will be lining up as well. But we believe that we have a good case because we are in the Golden Triangle, and we're probably one of the highest growth councils in New Zealand. So we're having significant pressures, financial pressures, and we do need central government help, no matter what. So, but yeah, we will be out trying to hunt those dollars down if we can.
And Councillor Patterson, do you mind if I give my LTP speech? Is it timely for that?
It is very timely.
Just in terms of, I guess, all of Waikato District Council's demands in terms of capex and capital, when we look at the wastewater treatment plants within our rohi, not only is Raglan requiring expenditure on a consent renewal, so is Huntly coming up for 28-29, so is Ngāwahia coming up for 28-29, so is Tika Wada. It's already just had an extension, but will require another extension in 2032. We've got capacity constraints in Pukekohe and Tuakau, even though that's serviced by the wastewater treatment plant in Pukekohe. That too has had an upgrade and is already at capacity and requires another upgrade by 2032. So when we start looking at what that means, then actually the capital expenditure for Waikato is eye-watering. And when we look at that as an impact on rates, because we use a district-wide rating, so whatever we do in Raglan affects the ratepayer in Huntly and Ngāruahi and Pocono, and whatever we do in Huntly and Ngāruahi affects the ratepayer in Raglan. Those impacts on rates are going to be potentially significant. Now, the council is going through its 24-34 long-term plan process right now. So internally, all of the business units are putting together their plans, their strategic plans in terms of what their capital costs are, what the priorities need to be, and that's for not only the waters business, the roading business, parks and reserves business, libraries, every other business unit within council. And I don't envy Councillor Patterson or any of the other councillors in terms of having to grapple with the information there and with very limited resource, determine how we go forward, and then what the impacts to the communities are. But there's a very big hurdle to get over, and the answer is not clear. So, Chris, when we go back to your discussion in respect to government money, it's more important that we try and get as much of that pot as possible to limit the effect on the community. So watch the space. I know council will go out and consult with everybody in respect to what the LTP looks like, and try and get opinion. But our hurdles, when you look at the news and you see what Wellington are wanting to charge, what Hamilton, our next door neighbour, is looking at charging, we have exactly the same issues to grapple with and try and find a way through. So we're in an interesting time.
We absolutely are, and if you just think about, as Keith just mentioned, just the wastewater and water compliances and issues and the upgrades and especially these new plants that we're having to bring online, that there in itself could create significant rate increases, let alone day-to-day business, business as usual, and the rest of council's areas of work. So it's eye-watering, really. And then the other big chunk of council's big spend is roading too, and everybody's sick of potholes and that as well. So that's it's tough, because as we all know, government over the years and currently is throwing all of these different things at councils around compliances and quality levels, etc., but they never send any dollars along with it. So the poor ratepayers getting flogged. So it is a tough environment to be in, and I think without mixing up the Raglan and what's happening at Tico Whara and that, but I think the process happening there is that people are starting to realise that a conveyance of a pipe or something's $40-odd million plus maybe $50 million. That there's going back to a small pool of people that are going to be paying for it, and it's us that flush the toilet and turn the tap on, and it's frightening. And I think some people there in that group, in that TK group, are starting to realise that the decisions they make can have serious long-term impacts on the affordability of people. Whether you are a homeowner or you rent, those renters are going to get hammered as well. So it's just a tough environment we're in, but I think every council's in that situation at the moment. So yeah, tough.
So we'll wait until February and we'll see what our government, what our central government is able to do by the way of assisting us through this.
Yeah.
Can I ask why, if the memorandum of understanding has finally been done, you're still looking at the alternatives like Wainui Reserve? And is it still not certain that it's possible, despite the MOU, to go ahead, or what's the story?
It's still possible, John, but when we start looking at these costs, we really owe owe it to everybody, just like Eugene said, to look at the other options. You know, and to do it at Wainui Reserve would be far more cost effective, and I think it would be less complex to operate too. You know, the rotation of those fields and pumping up to those fields, it's a high head pump. The operating of the farm around those fields won't go without challenges, you know.
Yeah, because you've been aware of that all the way through, so I'm just wondering why you're going back to that option, which you did look at, what, a year or two ago, was that 3 years ago?
Yeah, you're right, John. We do need to get to a point where we can draw a line in the sand and say that these are on the table, not the table. But we do have to finish the analysis of all of the options and put that out to the community in terms of, from a multi-criteria analysis perspective, which ones we recommend, which ones we don't, and then the community tell us how they feel about each of those options. And we haven't yet finished that job. We're not far away from doing it now. But Ocean Outfall, Harbour Outfall, Wainui Reserve, Golf Club, you know, some of them you can say are very long options and are no longer really relevant. They sit there, and we'll get to a point where we draw a line in the sand, say all the analysis has been done. Now which one are we favouring, and we'll project out to that. And that includes costing that as well, and impact. So I think we at the moment we've only got the technical study dealt with. We haven't got the other parts of the answers provided.
But I'm also wondering whether part of the problem is the price that David Peacock wants for it, and whether you might remember at the public meeting I did ask about the possibility of compulsory purchase, and whether that might be an option as regards that.
The Public Works Act as a tool in this case is not available to us because there are other options available. We can only use compulsory acquisition where there's no other available methods to us, and in this case there are other available methods. So it's willing buyer, willing seller, or willing negotiator. So, and then we've had that, and look, he's been open. And I've got to say, the prices aren't about the land. That's one component of it. The other prices are conveyance, design, and operations and maintenance. So it is more holistic, and I wouldn't say that the Peacock land has been provided to us with a stranglehold of any situation. No. It is that current market.
Yeah, and we canvassed a lot of private property owners, and he was the only one who put his hand up and said yes, John. So I think you know, you've got to give him a bit of, you know, it's the only reason we've got that option to look at, and it is the best soil conditions. And
I think it's very easy to try and say that the landowner's wanting too much money. It's a cop out. Like, it's actually way less than what if he cut it up and, you know, did another subdivision. So correct. He can just hold onto it and give it to his grandkids, and in 50 years they could, you know. So I think it's really we actually need to get away from that narrative in the community and actually understand that he is actually trying to work with Water Care and Council to create something potentially you know, groundbreaking.
Yeah. And thanks, Keith, for giving John that explanation on the Public Works Act and whether it can be applied here, because I know John, I said that I'd give him an answer for that tonight, so thanks.
Welcome. All right, now there's only one other issue on the table for tonight, and it's just really in relation to the current plant. It's really just information, expediency of information. And it's outside of discharge options, but it is in relation to discharge. And that is on Saturday morning, we had a partial discharge of, we had a discharge of partially treated effluent into the harbour on the outgoing tide. So the UV of the plant failed, but just the discharge occurred. Matthew, I might just hand over to you if I may, just in terms of some detail.
course, I'm on silent. There we go. Thanks, Keith. Yeah, so just as a bit of background, so the UV treatment that occurs at this plant is essentially a single train of UV. It's got 24 bulbs in it. So those bulbs are there to treat the final partially treated effluent. So the pond treatment does a significant amount of treatment, but the UV is there to do the final bacterial cleansing of the effluent to get it to fully treated effluent. And now, unfortunately, on Friday evening, these bulbs failed and the UV failed, and that was Friday evening to Saturday morning. Now, the plant is designed to shut itself down when that doesn't work because, of course, to discharge partially treated effluent is outside our consent. The plant did exactly that. It shut itself down. And the team got people in to investigate the UV and try and identify the issue. So they did that. I believe they understood that the UV had been repaired, but unfortunately, when the plant went to discharge again on Saturday morning, the UV failed again. At that stage, the operators of the plant escalated to the on-call person who's there to support them. They went through the details of what was happening. And the decision in these situations is always whether it's appropriate, whether we have sufficient storage in the ponds so that we don't have to discharge partially treated effluent, or whether due to the nature of the ponds and the risk of overtopping them, which will always be a significantly more environmental risk than discharging partially treated wastewater, we make a decision on what to do. Now, this individual on call escalated this issue to two other senior managers. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make contact with them, and on that basis made the decision to discharge. So they were contacted just about an hour later, and after going through the decision making with the senior manager, they agreed to stop the discharge. It wasn't appropriate. There was sufficient capacity in the pond for another period of time. After which the UV was investigated, the issue was found, the issue was removed, so essentially two of the bulbs weren't working as required, so those two bulbs were removed from the program so that the system could operate on 22 bulbs until it's ultimately repaired. So what that meant is for a period of about an hour and 20 minutes, there was partially treated effluent discharged from the heads on the outgoing tide. Now, the reason signs aren't put out in this situation is because the effluent isn't entering the harbour, it's discharging from the harbour. The amount was approximately 230 cubic litres of waste, so quite a small volume technically, and the dilution of it with the pace of the tide and the discharge is quite significant to create dilution of that volume of waste. Obviously, again, it's a bit of a disappointment. We'll be working as part of the investigation with the on-call person just to understand the decision making. Our staff do at times have to make high pressure decisions to understand what they should do. And sometimes those decisions in retrospect, because hindsight is a wonderful thing, may not have necessarily been the right decision, and then we work through with them as part of learning to understand how to approach these things in the future. So that's essentially what occurred. It is a bit disappointing, and we do have measures in place, as I said, around escalations, but unfortunately the person wasn't able to contact somebody in time to run their thinking and their thought process by just to validate. So that's essentially what occurred. The UV, I believe, has now been fully repaired and the plant is operating as it normally would. And we're back to full and normal operations going forward.
So
happy to answer any questions.
I was to say, Matt, so regional council were also notified as part of the normal escalation process after such an event, and we've also put in this information up on the website in terms of being able for the community to be able to access it for the purposes of transparency, but also thought it was important, given this is the first community meeting that we've had since that Saturday, to also to raise it here, just to ensure that everybody was and is aware of that technical breach from a compliance perspective.
That's correct.
So, sorry guys, I'm just wondering, was there, looking at the size of that building, is there no option to actually put a second building in where you can have that using a 50% duty cycle where you transfer between the two? So if you do actually get one that shuts down, the other one can carry on working and you won't run into this problem? It's not a very big UV plant. I mean, I've seen Hamilton's one. Theirs is massive in comparison, obviously. But looking at the size of that building, surely it'd be more cost effective versus getting fined by the regional council because of discharging, to actually put a second version of that in right next door to it, pipe it all in, you've got your power there. I would have thought that would have been a much cheaper option as a backup plan to avoid these sort of discharges.
Yeah, it's a good point, Chris. If you look at the operation of the plant and how it is, and when it was originally constructed, so it was built back in I believe 1970s. The new consent was issued in 2005. So the decision to have a single train was made quite a long time ago. As part of the new plant, the UV consideration will be part of that. The fact that the plant operates on a tidal discharge actually allows quite a significant amount of time between available discharges to do any works or inspections or repairs on that. Whereas in a normal plant discharge where you're constantly discharging, that's when you're generally cycling your UVs. But as you've rightly so said, you've got a backup. You've always got one or the other that could operate if you have any trouble. In this case, the advantage of this particular plant is the pond storage that we have there. We have a significant amount of pond storage, and that on top of the out of cycle discharges is what I believe was probably the decision made to have a single train. But I agree with you with the intent of what you've heard today with Richard and the move to the new consent and the options of possibly being able to have a constant discharge rather than just a tidal discharge. Then having two UV trains would probably be more sensible, but I don't want to predispose it. That's the process that Peter and Richard and the team go through as they look at the plant. And it may be that the plant itself doesn't require it right now, but when we get the new consent and the new discharge option, then we upgrade it at that point. But they'll be looking at that.
And as part of the investigation, Chris, also Matt and his team are just looking at the software that runs that plant. So as right now, when the UV fails, the UV shuts down, and so does the plant. There may be opportunity for us to minimize or slow down the discharge if a bulb goes out, and the plant might recognize that there's a bulb. So we'll alarm and let somebody know, but still allow discharge to occur at a slower flow rate. So we still get efficacy, but it doesn't stop the plant. So I think we'll take some process improvements away, or Woodacare will, as part of this investigation, and look to see what we can do with the current resources to improve outcomes should this event raise its head again.
That's correct.
I'd like to put Ed on the spot here. Perhaps Ed can clarify what the regional council's response is to that incident of non-compliance. Presumably, we've requested a incident report on why, how, why, and so forth.
We were advised at 9:54 on Saturday morning about the incident after it had happened. So we're waiting to hear details now from them in an incident report of what actually occurred, and then we'll make our decision once we've got that.
That's correct. Yeah. So we're putting together that investigation report right now. I've been able to give you the broad strokes of it. Obviously, it'll be a bit more detailed, but that's based on what we know to date, and I'm confident in that information, which is why I've shared it prior to the report. But we'll be providing that report within 10 working days, but essentially as soon as possible is what we always try to work towards.
All right. No, thank you for that.
Because the public meeting was asking for reassurances that things weren't going to happen again, and that they were talking about the programming of the tidal pumping. But are there also reassurances that can be given here? And there were also quite a number of suggestions about linking the tidal pumping to, for example, the regional council's tide gauges and things like that. So I wondered if those had been looked at all.
There are a range of options, John. As an example, in Mangaree, we operated on a tidal sensor rather than a program such as this. But we haven't had the ability or the time yet to look at all those options and assess whether we would change something at this stage. But it is certainly something we can consider, yeah.
And I think
at our kickoff meeting, oh, sorry, Keith.
No, sorry, you go.
At our kickoff meeting with the Apex Water, the new contractor, the whole issue about having a second sensor to override the tidal charts, just to make sure it doesn't happen, was raised. So it'll be looked at in the new plant.
And the alarms and everything that we talked about at that session, John, worked perfectly because this did occur on the outgoing tide. So this was a separate issue to the tidal issue as such. But anything we can do to improve as we do the new plant, we'll definitely look to do as well.
I'm not sure whether it is feasible to link up the setup that regional councils got down at the wharf.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure, John. But we'd probably generally look to have our own tidal sensor just for the security of it, because we'd want to have full ownership and responsibility of ensuring it's operating correctly, and it would generally also look to be have a secondary or a backup option as well there. But we're certainly, as Richard said, certainly as part of the new plant, we'll be talking with Apex about that.
Yeah, then it gives us two methods, but with the new plant too, the tidal discharge, you know, we're hoping, the plans are that we're going to go to some sort of land disposal recharge. I think that's heading towards the favoured option. So we will still want a marine discharge for emergencies, but it won't be, like I said before, be used very, very rarely if everything goes well at the plant.
Yeah, and in that situation, we wouldn't have the frequency that we have at the moment, which I explained at the session, which is every day on the outgoing tide, twice a day, we discharge.
From my conversations after the public meeting, I was told that we're getting a whole, even with the new upgraded plant, to cover obviously the time of the new plant being up and running, there'll still be a marine discharge, and there'll be a wholly new upgraded tech that manages the discharge with the new, so that's still happening, right? The new tech comes with the new plant for the current discharge.
Yeah, so as part of any new plant, we redo all the programming. So that plant requires its own new programming to operate. And that's where we have all the control systems and the manuals, if you want to call them that, for how the plant operates, that we receive when the plant is handed over to the operational team. And that ensures that the operational team are very aware of exactly how it operates, which has been one of the issues with this particular plant, and some of that information wasn't quite as available. But going forward, once this new plant is in place, one, we absolutely will have new programming, and two, we'll have a very clear understanding of that programming.
I've got to run, but for next year, can we maybe talk about making the meetings every 2 months or every 6 weeks, and then having them a little longer, so that like maybe less frequent but more depth?
Yep. I think that's a good idea, Chris. I think we will look at going bi-monthly, and then being able to fill it with more information when we do meet. So yeah, we will, and I might try to catch up with you at some stage anyway and have a chat about that.
Cool.
Thanks.
I'm back on January 22nd. I'm not available until then.
Oh, you lucky bugger! You've got a good holiday.
Enjoy your break.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Alrighty.
I think we might have come to the natural end of the meeting anyway. Is there any questions that people have been dying to ask but haven't had the opportunity?
Other than about the fact I've got a gammy eye. Don't ask about that.
Yeah.
I was going to message you there and ask you who you've been boxing with. So.
Yeah. Well, I lost clearly. No, this is 2 weeks of an eye infection. Trust me, it's not fun.
Oh, geez.
It's looking better today, Matt. So
it is sadly, it's looking better.
Oh, wow.
Any moustache whiskers in it, did you, by mistake, when you were shaving?
There's lots of explanations for it. None of them are pleasant. So, yeah.
Alrighty. Oh, well, if we're at the end, I'd just like to thank everybody for their participation in these meetings, and I do think it is a good call moving into next year to probably look at going bi-monthly. We there was a bit of pause and a sort of a pause on information and what everybody can gather over probably for the next month. So we'll have a chat about that, but we'll definitely share our next meeting in plenty of time, and it may be end of maybe February sometime or something like that, or maybe even early March. But we will definitely come back to everybody when we've got some decent information or some advances on where we're at today. So, but yeah, as already been mentioned, I think you know, we're here to get the best wastewater system and discharge system that we can possibly get, but and the best outcomes for the environment, but actually what our communities can afford. That's going to be a big factor. So we're here to get the best bang for buck. So as once again, thanks everybody. Have a real safe and fun Christmas with whānau and friends and all your loved ones, and keep safe out there, and look forward to seeing you in this forum in the new year sometime. So I'll just close this off with a karakia. E te atua, kia tutuki pai o mātou mahi e tēnei hui. Kia tau mai tō rangi mari me o manakitanga. Amene.
Amen.
Amene.
Thank you,
Thank you
Councillor
very
Patterson.
much.
Thanks, Eugene.
Thank you very much. And yeah, as I said, keep safe, keep